I'm just gonna level with you here. I did not do this assignment correctly. I already knew what I wanted to write about. So my points, I just kind of let myself be as scatterbrained as possible, and everything I even considered writing about, I kind of put on here, even though I already knew what I wanted to do. So, the first thing and I couldn't really have written a paper on this, which is why I didn't go with it, but it was something that really kind of interested me, was that Alex undergoes the Ludovico method in order to force him to conform to the moral standards of the government. And I wanted to know how the government justifies achieving their perceived morality through obviously immoral means. And then I talked about how the party in 1984 is after complete power to the point where all human emotions have been eradicated. And then I was wondering how, if all human emotions have been eradicated, why would the party know that it loves power? How would the party know that it wanted to maintain its power? And then the government in V for Vendetta is extremely immoral, which leads the audience to despise it. So I wondered, why do we root for V, an anti-hero, who is also extremely immoral, simply because he pits himself against a different immoral being? Why do we choose which one is worse, and pick one to root for over the other? The general environment of life at Child 44 is one of distrust, hostility, fear, and pain. This is kind of what Christine and Whitney both talked about. And I was wondering, do all of the emotions that pit humans against one another give the government even more control over its citizens as they have nothing else to turn to? And this one's just kind of my initial thought on the research paper was the propaganda aspect. And the citizens of Child 44, V for Vendetta in 1984 are kept under near constant surveillance. How does this constant fear and lack of privacy influence the psychological and moral ideas of citizens in the novel? But the thing I'm actually going to write about is how, the fourth thing, I don't think I'll use Child 44 in this. I think I'll use the other three. But, how does, the government controls, every aspect of their lives. And, how does that influence morality? When the government is the one making moral decisions for us, what does that do to our own moral decision making? And I thought that was usually when I'm writing a research paper or any paper, my biggest problem is why does it matter? Why is it relevant to life now? And I feel that's really important because our government has gradually become more involved in moral decisions and what people they make things legal that are debatable, are morally debatable to some people. And I was is that and obviously these novels are dystopian and they're not working out very well. So do we want that? Is that a good thing? So yeah, that's cool.
So the first thing I want to ask is, do you believe that Alex is an evil person?
I do.
Okay. So then what is evil to an immoral man? Why exactly is it that the immoral actions that the government are doing are evil, at least from Alex's perspective? So why is it necessarily evil to Alex?
I think that what Alex thinks of bad or evil as is anything that does not allow him to act in accordance with what he wants to do. And I think that Alex views himself as a prophet or as a Christ figure, or as someone who is above everyone else. So he so he believes that when he's not he doesn't think what he's doing is wrong. He thinks he is an example for other people. I believe that he thinks that. So when the government intervenes in what he's allowed to do, I think that he sees that as evil whenever people stop him. I think that is what he considers to be bad or evil. Alex?
So for what you actually wanted to write about, you wanted to write about how if the government's making all decisions moral, what does that do to our own moral decision-making ability? Do you think morality is a relative thing? Can it be changed based on who's defining it? And if so, if the government's defining morality, and the people are trained to think in a government's specifically defined morality, would they still be moral?
I do not think that morality is relative. I think that, and I don't know if I would go with the way that our theology teachers teach it to us. I think that's not entirely correct either, but I think that morality can be situational perhaps, but I don't think that it changes based on who's defining it, because I might have completely different moral ideas than you do, and I think an even better example is Alex has entirely different moral ideas than the rest of us, but that doesn't mean that he's right. Just because he considers himself to be moral does not mean that he is. So I would say that it is not relative to who's defining it. Adam?
So if we're looking at it in Clockwork Orange, if we're going to look at it from the government's perspective, they basically made this Ludovico method as a way, you know, it was kind of new, like they were saying, and they wanted to test it out. If you had nothing else that you could do, if these problems with the street violence and the youth and everything, do you think that it was necessarily wrong of them to want to try something out as a way of, you know, ending that violence?
Honestly, I don't have as much of an opposition to the Ludovico method as most people do, I don't think, because actually Lindsay said something a long time ago, like when we first started talking about it, it was like, if you're gonna make those horrible decisions, do you really have the right to choose? Like, if you're gonna be like, if you're gonna wreak havoc all over society and cause everyone else issues, and because of your choices, like, do you really deserve that right? And I think that it is immoral to take away someone's right to choose, probably at the end of the day, but I think that it wasn't a bad idea. Like, I don't think that it was an evil idea, honestly. Like, I think that it was...
Yeah, because you could look at it from Alex's perspective, like they're taking away his free will, basically, which is wrong. But also, it's like, as the government, what else do you do? I mean, it's like...
a lesser of two evils, in my opinion, because, I mean, yes, you're taking away Alex's free will, but Alex's free will causes many more issues for society, so I think it's got to be like a lesser of two evils, like, which is worse.
And if that, like, okay, I don't honestly think that a government can be entirely moral. Because if you've got, like, situations like Alex, you're right, like, any time that he had the choice, he would choose something horrible to do. So it's a government's responsibility to take away, like, that possibility. If it means being immoral and taking away his choice, then I think that's better than letting him, like, wreak havoc all over society. If it means that the government has to be immoral for the safety of its citizens, I don't think that's necessarily evil, just because you're immoral.
I agree, honestly, and I think that that's kind of what is important to, like, my topic. The one thing that does concern me is, like, the fact that the government is defining morality enough to feel that they can conform someone to their standards of it, and I'm saying, do you want the government involved in that decision? But, like, I think you're, like, absolutely right. Jayla?
Cause like, where do you draw the line of like what's immoral and like what's not? Cause like, obviously we think that Alex is immoral, cause like I mean he's killing everyone, but like, I mean I don't have a good example, but like.
Do you mean like immoral for the government's perspective or immoral for the person?
I guess kind of both, because like I mean the government is setting like the moral standard, so like, do we really want them to choose like, okay, well, this act is immoral, but like, oh, like, so like trash talking, say, using your free will,
Yeah.
freedom of speech, like.
I think where you're going, that's exactly my point, is like, do we really want the government to be making a definitive statement about this is what's moral and this is what's not? Because the government is not like, the government cannot be completely moral. It's like, I feel like we really don't want them like intervening in our morality and our decisions. And like in 1984, you see the government has made it to the point where it's become a moral thing for people to turn on their families and people to like snitch on each other and people to like kill each other that are contrary to the party or whatever. Like that's not moral, it's not okay. But they've made it okay because they say that it is that.
But how do they constitute like the gray matter? Because like obviously killing people like that's bad and like you know saving people is good. But like how do they constitute like the gray matter? It's like petty, like freedom of speech and like so forth. Like so.
Wait, what do you mean? Like do you mean like how do they like? I understand kind of what you're saying. But, like how does the government decide what to do about those things?
Yeah. So like in today's society, like our court system, like I mean, like sometimes it, like you said, it's the government. They say this for like one case, but then something very similar, like they like give the death penalty opposed to like letting this person free.
I mean, I've always been, my belief has always been that the government should be involved less, because I think that a government has a lot of power just by being a government. Like when the government says like, okay, this is happening, like people, like the majority of people are gonna follow. Like there are always gonna be those people that don't, but like people want to listen to their government for the most part. So I think it's always better for the government to seize less power, especially over gray matter like morality, which really can't be, or probably shouldn't be defined by any one body. So like I think that it's best for the government to step back more than step forward, and I think in our society we experience the government gradually like creeping more and more into moral decisions. Christine?
Who gets to choose morality then? I mean, I understand that like we're all supposed to have our own, but in the case of Alex and like the fact that he isn't choosing the moral thing, like who gets to define what the government thinks is moral? Because, you know, in some cases you do have to step in. Some people aren't going to choose that moral choice.
So like, are you asking like what to do with the people that don't?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, because it's like,
If that's where like the immoral government comes in. Like you can't have a completely moral government.
yeah, then
So
who chooses?
it's gonna have to be the government in that case, just because
Mhm.
we're gonna assume that the government is mostly moral, but because there's like special cases like Alex, where you
Mhm.
can't help but be immoral for the sake of everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's gonna have to be done. Like it's still qualified as immoral. Like
Mhm.
by any like one person. Like I
Uh-huh.
mean even Alex thinks it's immoral because it's going against what he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just gotta be done.
I also think it's important to note that like most people do behave like overall, like even though I believe that people are immoral, like all of us are immoral, but like people fight against it. I think, but for the most part, like whether we're immoral or moral, most people do fight against it and they behave and they
Mhm.
conform. And so I think that like because the government dealing with special cases like Alex is not really an overstep of
Mhm.
boundary, because it's like necessary, I
Like
guess.
a special case.
It's a special case. That's not normal. Like that's
Mhm.
not. So who's Michael?
Yeah. In our society, well, in my opinion, the difference between our government and the government in dystopian novels is we elect the officials in the government. So they're essentially the leaders of the people. They don't separate. They're not separated from the people. So when they are making the decisions, essentially they're representing their own constituent and what do they think. So if the trend is that way, and that's why they want to, in order to have an order, that's why they make decisions. They're not able to make whatever decisions they want because instead of dystopian novel totalitarian, we have democracy.
I agree with that to an extent. However, I think that you have to also realize that the people that get elected are representing approximately half of the population. They're not representing everyone. Like for example, like whenever like a big Supreme Court
More
ruling
than
or something
half.
happens, a little over half. But there are a lot of people that don't agree with the rulings that they're making. So like I say, that they're representing a sector of the population, maybe a larger sector,
Yes,
but not everyone. Like they're not representing.
because it's impossible.
That's true, but I don't think that makes it that much different. Like the government is still like passing a moral like whether I support it or you support it or don't, like abortion, gay marriage, those are all things that people dispute over constantly. And like I think that
That's why we need compromise.
that's why we need can you really compromise on that?
Yeah. Like on debates, well, up to the debate,
Half of gays can get married, but the other half can't.
Yeah, right?
I don't know how you compromise on that. That's the thing I'm saying. Like,
Can't.
but the government has decided that whether you agree or not,
well,
it's
that's what
allowed.
happened in the foundation of the. Eventually, it's going to be solved, but to initiate, like what Constitution did with the slavery, that's what they did. But it's not the final solution. But eventually, they will make a decision like slavery is bad, then we abolish it. But still, there are people opposing that. By then.
Yeah, but I think that the people who had slaves, I don't think they would have said what we're doing is moral. I think that what they would have said is it's
Because-
beneficial to us. I don't think that was entirely, it was a moral issue for the people that thought it was bad, but for the people that wanted slavery, I really don't think there were that many people that would wholeheartedly have argued, no, this is completely okay. Like this is good, but they thought it was good. They thought that
There are
it
recorded
was
documents though,
economically.
stating some defenses for
Yeah.
slavery, and they did say that it's their moral obligation to keep the slaves. That was a
Yes.
valid argument using
I mean,
the Bible as
yeah.
a pretext.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that like, I mean that's true. I know that there were people that like did really think that slavery was okay, but I just think that as a whole, like slavery as an issue was like more of a like we just want this because it's beneficial to us.
Well,
Like-
people thought that they were saving them from like
Yeah, I remember
otherwise
that.
not having a home or having shelter or something.
I mean, I guess I just wonder, like, those arguments we learned about them last year, like, I think most of us, like, completely rolled our eyes and, like, we're like, oh my gosh, like, they're the worst. Like,
Like, how much of
because,
that were they
I mean,
convincing
did
themselves?
they really believe that? That's what I'm
Yes,
saying,
they were
like.
racist, basically.
Well, like, because they were racist means that they would go to, like,
Extreme.
ends to, like, convince themselves that, hey, this is okay. It's because, oh, well, like,
But
It's
that's
Because
even.
they're not as equal.
Well, yeah, the general
How did
idea
we
about
get
slavery
here?
is that
Hold
you're
on.
superior- you're
I'm
superior
gonna
to those
just leave it here, Jordan.
So I just wanted to go back to your point before that, where you were saying that it was okay for them to take Alex's free will away because he was the only case. But in Clockwork Orange, I think the doctor said that he would just be the trial, that they were planning to do it to most of the people in the jails to get them out of the jails. And so at that point, they're creating this multitude of robots. I mean, they're not thinking, they're not doing anything for themselves. So I don't agree with the government doing that to citizens. They're taking all the power and turning these people into not people.
I don't mean this, like, sarcastically, if that's how it sounds, but, like, what would you suggest? Like,
I would
like,
suggest keeping them in the jails or fixing, obviously your government is not doing something right.
that I agree with.
So there's another solution besides taking the free will away. I mean, if they want to do other extreme things, they can put them in isolation. They can, I guess, killing them probably is not better, but I mean, there are other options out there besides just completely wiping them of their free will, and I don't think it's moral for the government to choose that. And I know that you're saying that the government is inherently immoral, but
I understand what you're saying.
I get it. It's kind of a side point. It's not completely relevant. But do you think Alex had free will at the end of the book when he chose that, like, oh, I want to have a family?
I mean, I think that one of Alex's last point was like, is it more of a does like external stimulus or internal stimulus what really makes you change?
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely think that internal stimulus is what does it. Like when you want it for yourself, because like obviously right after he underwent the Ludovico method, like I believe that he was completely the same person. Like I said that before, because he still wanted to do all the same things. He would have if he could, but he couldn't. So I think that he finally chose like for himself to change his mind. And like I think that is when he changed. Like I think that's when he's scared. Like
So do you think it was okay that the government had the treatment and then took the treatment away and then he decided it himself? Because it basically you're saying that the treatment didn't really affect him. So is that technically a bad thing if they didn't then took it away?
well, I don't think that makes the treatment that
Like
affects
just,
the morality of the treatment
yeah.
because they didn't know that was gonna happen. Like that wasn't their intention.
Yeah.
So like they like Jonah was saying, like they didn't intend any of that to happen.
Yeah.
Like that's how it worked out. So like I don't think that changes really the morality of it. Lydia?
Okay, so Alex is in prison with other like criminals who are worse than he is, and they're supposedly gonna get out eventually, and it doesn't like say anything about what happens to them. And then Alex is like learning like scripture and everything. He's supposed to get out later. So do you think that if they hadn't like used the Ludovico technique, would he have changed eventually? Like,
I actually think that it's possible, for sure. Like I think that it's possible for people when they want it for themselves to change. Like that's the only way I believe that you can change. So that's why I've always been I oppose the death penalty personally because I think that if you learn to want it for yourself, you can change, and that no one has the right to take that decision away from you. But, so I think that Alex, maybe, I can't really say for sure. Like, I think that in Alex's case, I'm more inclined to say no, probably not, just based on the way that he was so determined to do what he was doing. But I think it is possible for sure. And I think that probably would have been a better way to go about it, is see how it goes. Adam?
Something interesting that Jordan kind of made me think about when she was talking about the how the government was going to, Alex was just the trial and they wanted to do this to all of the prisoners. In a way, it's like they are trying to get more power, so yes, they're, working for justice, but do you think, if they were all having a meeting about this, the people in the government, and they were all sitting there talking about the possible benefits, I feel like somebody in that room would have said, well, look at it this way, we can start getting more power if we do this. So in a way, is that even immoral that they're doing it not only for the justice part of it, but because they want to start controlling the people more?
I think that that's probably true, and I think that that's a lot of the reason why I don't think that government should have that kind of moral authority over people, because a lot of the time, like, there are those people in the government that really just want to be able to control you and really want to have as much power as possible. So I would say that, like, that's why even though I guess, like, since they did, like, the way that I see it, like, with Clockwork Orange is, like, I'm not really analyzing it, the Ludovico method, that is, like, from my perspective of government shouldn't be involved. It's more like, okay, this is what they did, like, this is what they chose to do, I can't change it, this is what happened. So I say, like, it could have been worse. Honestly, like, that's the way that I see it for Clockwork Orange, but if I had my way, I wouldn't have had the government intervene with Alex like that at all. Like, because I think that it is that way. Like, there is, like, the Ludovico method, like, I think they made an example of Alex, honestly. Like,
Do you think that a more gradual, or I guess if we were considering different ways to try and get rid of the violence, do you think that there's a point where they have to, put their foot down and say, even if this is inhumane, we have to do this, versus trying to do a more gradual, subtle, like, reformation program where they don't really make you have, terrible physical consequences?
I mean, I think that even though I said, like, I think that everyone has the right to come to choose, like, to not behave that way anymore, I don't believe that by choosing that, by making that choice, like, oh, I'm not going to behave this way anymore, that in any way erases what you've done in the past. Like, I think that even if you killed someone and you eventually see the error of your ways, that doesn't mean that it's okay and that you should be allowed to go back and you should be forgiven for it. It just means, like, oh, good for you. Like, you've changed your ways and you've, like, learned, like, that's good in itself, but that doesn't mean, this isn't gone though, you still did that. So, like, I don't know, I think that it is better to have people just pay fully, like, I think just, like, honestly, I think that prison is, like, the best way to do it, because I think that you have a lot of time for, like, internal retrospection, and, like, I think that, like, I guess I would say gradual.
What if they break out of prison?
Well, then you have a crappy prison system.
Well, but
it
what if
happens.
they kill people in prison? What do you do with those people?
Isolation.
You put them
Okay.
back, but
So-
That's one here.
Yeah.
Then they're isolated.
They can drive them insane.
Yes.
They won't be fixed, they'll be even worse.
Yeah. So that would be more.
So I guess, like, can those people be truly fixed, or is there even a way to do it without being, immoral?